بكم مرة تانية في هذه الحلقة الهامة من 90 دقيقة. لقائي في الفقرة الثانية من هذه الحلقة مع رئيس الاتحاد البرلماني الدولي صابر تشودري. هتكلم معاه باللغة الإنجليزية وهنترجم لحضراتكم في على الشاشة ايه اللي بيحصل عشان الحوار نحاول قدر الامكان ان هو ما ياخدش وقت طويل واقدر اسال اكبر كميه ممكنه من الاسئله. Your Excellency Sabir Chowdhury, head of the IBU or president of the IBU, I'm sorry, welcome to Egypt again. Allow me to welcome you in 90 minutes, and we start our conversation picking up on your meeting with the Egyptian president. You have done so many meetings in the past 2 days here when you're in Egypt. I mean, such a short visit, full of meetings. Give me the impressions of meeting with the President Sisi in Egypt, and what did you discuss with him?
Thank you. The first thing is, as you have said, a number of meetings, but what is important is that I've met with the entire spectrum. You know, when you look at a country, you look at the executive, which is the government, you look at the judiciary, and then you look at the legislature or the parliament. So I've actually met with representatives at high level of all three. Certainly the speaker is the highest in the legislative arm, and of course His Excellency the President heads the executive. It was a very good discussion. It was a very candid, a very open sharing of views on Egypt. You know, the roadmap that was charted out 2 years ago, that was given to the IPU, the elections, the new parliament, the challenges that the parliament is facing, and of course the region as a whole, given the importance of Egypt. So peace, security, stability in the region, with specific reference to some of the countries who are also members of the IPU. So, I mean, Iraq is a member of the IPU, Libya is a member, Yemen is a member of the IPU, Syria is a member, Palestine is a member. So we had a very free-ranging discussion, and I think it was important to have this discussion because we also wanted to have a better understanding and insight as to how the government is looking at the challenges that face Egypt and the region as a whole.
And what did you come up with? Did you agree on something? Was there a message? Did you deliver a message?
Well, I think one of the, not so much a message, because it wasn't one of those meetings where we were trying to pass messages to each other. I think it was a very cordial meeting, and we were really speaking from the heart. So there wasn't a script. You know, I didn't have any points written down, and neither did the President. And I think the overarching theme is that we need to have, in this new time, new situation, a new level of partnership between governments and parliaments. I think that came through very, very strongly. So whether it is implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, you know, the post-2015 development architecture, or responding to terrorism. We talked about the role of the legislature. And on terrorism, I think we were on the same page. We were both essentially talking about looking at the root causes of terrorism, not just looking at it in terms of a military response. And as I put it, you know, we have to look at the disease and not just the symptoms of the disease. So going deep into the discussion and the role that the IPU and the legislatures worldwide can play in that regard.
Which is, what is the role that the IBU or the legislative bodies all over the world that can play to confront terrorism?
It's a very good question. You have to understand the nature of the legislature. You know, they are not governments, they represent the people. So in terms of outreach to the people, in terms of molding public opinion, in terms of shaping public opinion, I think the parliaments have a huge role to play. In terms of legislation in various countries, because you're looking at prevention. So how do you prevent terrorism? In terms of investment in development, you know, whether it is education, whether it is a new future for the young generation in particular, because that came up. You know, why is the young generation looking to these extremist ideas and notions? Is it an identity crisis? Is it a disillusionment? Is it a lack of opportunities? So I think that's what you're looking at. And we are looking to add value. You know, we don't want to duplicate, we don't want to replicate what governments are doing, because that has already been tried. So we see where can we introduce new dimensions, where can we add value to the discourse. And I think this took up a lot of the time. And the president was certainly very appreciative, and I think he recognizes that the legislature has a role to play, as does the UN. Mr. Ban Ki-moon has recently written to us and said that let's try and get an implementation unit with the IPU in terms of countering terrorism. And that's certainly not in military terms. It's looking at other areas.
Which is excellent, and we hope, I think most of the nations, most of the people of the world hope that all different representatives, whether it be governments or legislative bodies, would succeed in confronting this threat that threatens us all.
Yeah, I think the important thing is everyone has to work as one team, and it has to be a global response. You can't have one single country carrying this banner. I think everyone needs to get into the same act together.
Mr. President, let me bring you back to Egypt. Now that the roadmap has been fulfilled, the roadmap that Egypt has announced, and finally we have our parliament. When do you expect our parliament to return and resume and continue its role in the IBU formally? When?
We have our next assembly, because it's a decision of the full assembly. Membership issues, and you know this well, Muhammad, these are resolved at the governing council level, because it's a very serious matter. Who is going to be a member, who is not going to be a member, when does an old member come back and join us again? So we have our assembly in Lusaka in Zambia in the 3rd week of March. And the governing council is going to consider a recommendation that will be made by the executive committee. And I think this visit has been very useful, because I chair both the executive committee and I preside over the governing council. So I'll be able to give some first-hand inputs into what I have seen, the fact that the roadmap has been fulfilled. Although there I will say that yes, the roadmap has been fulfilled in terms of the conditions having been met, but this is the process side. The other side is the outcome. What is important is not just to have a parliament, but to have a parliament that is going to be able to deliver on the expectations of the people, and that is going to show respect to the aspirations of the people. So this is again where the IPU comes in, because as you know, we have had a very long engagement and a very deep engagement with the Parliament of Egypt, which incidentally joined the IPU in 1924.
We are the 3rd country, I think.
You're the first outside Europe.
The first outside of Europe
to join the IPU.
To join the International Parliamentary Union, yes.
So it's it's a very valued and a very historic and a very established member. So I think now where we are looking at is how do we upgrade the capacity of the parliament? The big debate that is going on everywhere in the world is to what extent are institutions fit for purpose? We even asked that question of the UN. The UN just celebrated 70 years. So is the UN fit for purpose? And we asked this question whether it's in the UK, whether it is Bangladesh, whether it is the UAE or Egypt. To what extent is your national parliament fit for purpose?
Who has the ability to judge that this parliament is fit for purpose or not?
That has to be a call of the parliament itself.
Our parliament or the IBU?
No. The IPU never says whether you're fit for purpose or not. It's a call of the parliament, and what we are trying to do is to give the parliament the tools through which they can evaluate. So it has to be a self-evaluation. It has to be a self-assessment. And of course, ultimately, it is whether the people feel that the parliament is delivering. So I think that is now the big challenge and the next step forward if you look at the evolution of the parliament in Egypt. I mean, when I was there, it was exceptional. The warmth of the welcome.
Now, this is what I was going to ask you about.
So,
your feeling when you entered into the Egyptian parliament. This is your first visit?
It's the first visit. And, there is nothing like a parliament being filled with newly elected members.
Of course. I know the feeling.
You know the feeling. The excitement, the expectation, the enthusiasm. And it was all there. But what really struck me was not just the words of the speaker, which were, very eloquent. He was very profound in his appreciation and gratitude, but the warmth of the individual members, because we met with a lot of them in the corridors. And, you can see the excitement in their eyes. And there is, for the people, this is a matter of great hope. They have elected their representatives, and now their representatives are going to work for them. So it's a wonderful feeling, and I'm very glad that I've been able to visit Egypt at a time when it is starting a new era. This is a new phase in the journey of Egypt, and we certainly wish the people of Egypt and the elected representatives as well as the speaker all the very best.
Thank you. So, in March, third week of March, Lusaka, Egypt will submit a request to resume its role. It was frozen, sort of, but never cancelled. Egypt was never cancelled as a member of the International Parliament Union, right?
The statutes of the IPU are, because remember the link, the nexus between a country and the IPU is through the parliament of that country. So if that parliament for some reason doesn't function, or if the parliament has been dissolved, then there is no link for you to maintain that membership. So what had happened here was a decision was taken, since there is no parliament, and the dissolution took place as a result of a decision of the Egyptian government, then till such time the new parliament
it was the judiciary system.
Yeah,
it was a court role.
It was a court.
Yes, not the government.
No, okay. So it was through a judicial process. It's been dissolved. So the bottom line is there is no parliament. So if there is no parliament, then you can't have the interaction. But I read the resolution that was taken at that time, and it also says that as soon as Egypt has a parliament, we would be very happy to see them back in the fold. So I think that's where we are. Now the parliament has been formed, as you have said. The roadmap in terms of process has been completed, and the members of parliament have expressed a desire to be back in the fold of the IPU. So this is going to be put first to the executive committee, and then with a recommendation, it goes to the governing council. And so it will be an affirmation of that request.
It's a sort of a routine, but yet still we are waiting for the council to say its final opinion at that meeting. And then Egypt can attend that meeting.
Egypt, I have in fact invited the speaker to himself, if it's possible, to lead a delegation to Zambia. It doesn't have to be a very big delegation, because I think it would be nice for the members. And in these assemblies, it's not what happens in the formal sessions.
Of course.
It's the networking, it's the interaction that you have outside the sessions.
I totally understand.
So I think it'll be a wonderful opportunity for the other members to be brought up to date with the progress that has been made. And what I have done from my part as the president, as a matter of our goodwill, is to invite Egypt to send a delegation to two other events, IPU events, which are taking place before the assembly.
Which are?
One is the annual parliamentary hearing, which is held at the UN headquarters in New York. It's a joint IPU United Nations event. Mr. Ban Ki-moon will also be there. And this year they're going to be talking about drugs. So because there's a major UN event taking place, I believe in April or May, so the parliamentary input into that process is very important. How do parliamentarians see the many challenges?
How do we going to reflect the opinions of governments and legislative bodies? And
so that is one opportunity.
And that's an opportunity that's going to be happening in February. February, end of February.
8th and 9th of February.
Oh, it's just very soon.
Yes, it's very soon. And the other is prior to the assembly of the IPU, we now have a new forum within the IPU. It's a forum of young parliamentarians. And so I've actually invited the Honorable Speaker to send your young MPs, and I know there are many in this parliament.
Yes.
So, one man and one young woman, if they go, or even two or three, I think it'll be a great opportunity for young parliamentarians, first-time members of parliament. And I understand in the age group of 25 to 34, you have many of the
Yes, we have
MPs.
almost 100, or a bit less than 100, but under the age of 35, there is 200 members.
And that in itself is unique, because, and this I will share with you, when we were trying to come to an age which is going to be the cutoff point, at which point you are young, and at which point you are not young, or not so young. Mm-hmm. And we had to raise the bar. So the IPU bar is actually 45, because we wanted to get enough young people or young MPs to be in this forum. Of course, for Egypt, that's very easy, because you have got individuals who are there aged 25 to 34.
Yes.
And I think it will be a great exposure for them to talk to other young MPs from around the globe. And I think this is...
Where is this going to take place?
This will also be in Lusaka.
And Lusaka in Zambia.
And I believe it's the
1 week?
15th to the 17th.
Of March.
of March. So before the formal IPU assembly begins, we will have the young parliamentarians. And I think it will be wonderful if there is representation from the Egyptian parliament. So the point that I'm really trying to make is, although the formal readmission doesn't happen till the end of the assembly, which is going to be 22nd or 23rd, we are already opening our arms and making the Egyptian delegation welcome if they wish to attend any of these two events.
I hope that they do, and I'm sure they will be attending at least.
And I passed this on to the president also today. I said, and he was the president is very, he's very keen.
President Sisi.
Yeah, President Sisi is very keen to see the Egyptian parliament going back to the IPU, and I think he was very positive about this whole process, whereby we have engaged, and the roadmap has been completed. And now it gives you the chance to again be a part of the global parliamentary community.
Talk to me about the help and the assistance that you have provided the secretary of the Egyptian parliament or the secretarial part of the Egyptian parliament in the past 3 or 4 years.
When you're looking at capacity of parliament, there are two approaches. One is you look at the institution of parliament. So what is that institution? Where is the institutional memory of the parliament? How do you ensure continuity in the work of the parliament when there is a turnover of MPs? As you know, every 4 or 5 years, a lot of the MPs get voted out and you have new MPs. So how do you maintain continuity is a big challenge. So what we did at the IPU is we looked at your secretariat, we looked at the staff, and we gave them training. And this was a very extensive level of training. And this, remember, was done at a time when the Parliament of Egypt was not a member of the IPU. So it shows our commitment to the people of Egypt, that you are not a member, but still we are going to support you in terms of the secretariat. The other area we looked at is the IT backbone, how we can use IT to make Parliament more effective, more transparent. So that has been a phase. The other aspect has been the library. The library is really your reference point. It's supposed to be a resource point, a center of excellence, which adds to the image, to the effectiveness of a parliament, and also the individual members. Because through going to a library, finding out about previous discussions, debates, resolutions, you learn a lot. So these have been 3 very important areas. The other one that we are now discussing is, having sort of upgrade the competence level of the parliament, the capacity of the parliament, what about the individual members? Because you may have the best parliament in terms of facilities, in terms of IT, in terms of library, in terms of the secretariat
yes, of course.
staff.
And then you come back to the individuals that are actually using this.
Exactly, because they are the life force of the parliament. Without the actual members, Parliament would be pretty barren. So, and talking to some of the members, I think one of the areas we have identified is professional staffers. So, like if you look at the Congress, if you look at the Senate in America, you have professionals who assist a member of Parliament, whether it is doing research and finding out statistics, providing policy briefs, providing the analysis, because a parliamentarian is very busy. He has to look after his constituents, he has to do work there, he has to attend sessions. So this backup support is very important. So I think that is another area which we have now identified, where we can actually help the individual members of parliament to upgrade their capacity and skills.
You were the first international body to recognize the 30th of June revolution. The International Parliamentary Union have actually sent a letter recognizing the 30th of June. You've also recognized the 25th of January. But why? At that point of time, you were like an international body saying to the whole world, this is a true people's revolution. These people came out on the 30th of June because they want to change.
The IPU, given the nature of its organization, has always had a focus on people. We always look at what the people want, and we have to go on the basis of that reflection from time to time. So if we feel that this is what the people are asking for, we usually take the side. And I think it's interesting. I mean, I mentioned about the UN earlier on. You know, the preamble to the Charter of the UN starts off with the words, "We the peoples of the United Nations."
Yes.
You know, but the UN is not so much about people now, it's more about bureaucracy.
It's about governments.
It's about governments. So we have always tried to keep that people focus. You know, if you look at the work of the IPU, and I know that, you know, you have done a lot of admirable work on this, you have researched the organization, there has been this singular focus on what the people want. Now, it's very difficult to predict, you know, if the people are going to change the perceptions, and if they do, then we are also respectful towards that. So we have, as an organization, always tried to differentiate ourselves, identify ourselves with the aspirations of the people. And if we feel that, yes, this is what the people are actually seeking, we show solidarity with that. It's more a matter of principle rather than individual events.
Excellent. Which takes me to the second question regarding this issue. A lot of trials have been made. I'm trying to choose my words in English here. A lot of trials have been made, whether it be from ex-MPs, ex-Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood MPs, who came actually and requested meetings, formal meetings in the IBU to try and push Egypt out and push the Egyptian government out, or from actually countries that have said, no, we don't want Egypt here anymore, this is not a revolution, this is this is that. How do you handle these requests? And you have met, it was mentioned before, that you have met ex-members of the IBU coming in against Egypt, and they've discussed it and they've announced it, the Muslim Brotherhood have announced this. How are you going to be handling this in the upcoming period, and how did you handle it in the past period?
You see, the safest way of going about it is to go on the basis of your statutes and the basis of your rules. The moment you deviate from there, you run into tricky ground. So I think we have always tried to play it by the book. What are the statutes? And the statutes are very clear. And so if we stand by the statutes of the rules of the IPU, which is something that all of the members have adopted, if somebody comes and makes a request which doesn't fall within the purview of the rules of the IPU, it's very easy, in fact, to take a position. So we always try and look at it in terms of we are faithful, we are respectful of our own rules which you have set. So if somebody comes and wants to violate those rules, that is a non-starter. And I think this is how we protect the organization.
So you just applied the rules that are there?
We applied the rules.
And the rules automatically just push them away?
If there is no parliament at some point, you know, then it applies that, okay, you are not for now a member. And it happened in the case of Bangladesh also, twice, you know, my own country.
Yes.
When there was no parliament, when there was some disruption in the continuity of the parliamentary process, IPU suspended the membership. So I think we have always been very consistent there. Of course, sometimes you have very gray lines. You know, you have to make calls. But I think we just follow the rules. And I think that is fair to everyone. That gives certainty to the members as to how we are going to react in certain situations. You have seen that our commitment to the people of Egypt is such that even when, as I've said earlier, you were not a member, we continued with the engagement because we knew that there would come a time, as now, when the parliament would be in place, and then the technical support that we have extended in the interim can really be utilized for the benefit of the people of Egypt.
Excellent. You brought us back to the parliament, and let me ask you also. You talked to me about the youth. Tell me, how do you feel about the women members of the Egyptian parliament? Now we have the biggest ever number of women MPs in the Egyptian parliament. How do you look at that?
In fact, when I was thinking of what will I report back to the executive committee when we have our assembly, you know, on this visit. And one is through what process, you know, the elections, the voter turnout, and how many people participated. That is not what we are looking at. You know, we are looking at the reality today. And this is perhaps the most inclusive, the most diverse, and it's a very rich parliament. You know, it's not just record number of women MPs. It's not just first-time MPs. It's not just youth MPs. But you have a quota also for the physically challenged.
Yes.
And the visually impaired. I think there are very few constitutions in the world that actually allow for that. So I think this is something that has really caught my imagination, is to have such a mix in your parliament which represents the entire spectrum of the community. And what the IPU always talks about is having parliaments that are inclusive. Because if a parliament is not inclusive, then it cannot protect.
It's downgraded by points.
It's downgraded by points, and it cannot protect the interest of everyone. So now, you have physically challenged, you have the visually impaired, you have women, you have
the youth.
Young people,
yes.
You have a huge flow of energy because there are so many new MPs who have been elected. So I think it's a very exciting time for you.
It is very exciting time for us, and I hope it will be a very exciting time for you too. Coming from Bangladesh, as they call us, third world countries, right? But you became to be the head of the International Parliamentary Union as a representative of your own people. Tell me, people have been watching television here and they have seen the arguments that are happening in the parliament and they were just like, sit back, oh my God. Maybe it's the first time they follow up something that long. Tell me, does this happen in all the parliaments around the world? Do you have?
Well, parliaments, where does the word parliament come from? It comes from the French word parler,
yes,
which is to talk.
Exactly.
So parliaments are places where you're going to talk. And I would much rather have people talking than arguing rather than fighting.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good thing that you debate. And through debate and discussion, you can arrive at conclusions which are going to be more acceptable. They'll be more refined. And our politics as politics in a lot of country has been very polarized, because we have some parties who question the independence of Bangladesh. They try and put their own versions of history. But I think Bangladesh is now moving ahead, if I may say so. And this is very interesting, and I think it applies to countries, even to Egypt. See, when you've got bitter memories from the past, how do you handle that? Because that is always polarizing.
You learn and you have a new vision.
Yes. Exactly. And the new vision that you have has to be more powerful than the bitter memories of the past. Only then a country moves forward. So you have your past, you have the bitterness, you have the very negative memories, but you need an even more powerful vision of the future so that people can say, no, if I weigh this up, the vision of the future is more powerful, more appealing, and that's what I'm going to choose. That is when a country transforms. That is when a country moves forward.
Allow me in the end of this to only just ask about the role, the IBU versus the United Nations. Who's leading the world? In our countries, there is a lot of power given to the parliaments. In our constitutions, a lot of power given to the parliaments. But not in decision-making around the world. It's the United Nations, it's the governments, it's the interests of the government. As a parliamentarian from a third world country, how do you look at this? How can we change that?
See, we quite often hear about experts and internationally acknowledged figures talking about governance in a national context. The governance in a country like governance in Egypt, governance in Bangladesh, governance in Ethiopia. What we quite often forget is that governance in a national setting is determined to an extent by global governance. And what are those mechanisms of global governance? You've got the financial global governance, you've got the IMF, you've got the World Bank, you've got the other financial institutions. So what about governance there? To what extent is that setup representative of the world? To what extent do the developing countries have a say, for instance, in how the World Bank is run? I'm just giving you an example.
Exactly.
Likewise for the UN. Now it's a very topical discussion. I think we have had an outstanding Secretary General in Mr. Ban Ki-moon. Now the question is, how are we going to select the next Secretary General? To what extent is that process going to be a transparent process? So these are very basic questions.
Do you think the UN charters should change?
I think, no, the charters in terms of the objectives are fine. but it is how you deliver on that objective. So it's really the structures. I mean, starting from the choice of the Secretary General, will it be a few countries who will exercise their influence to say, this is the person? Will it be a system of rotation? Is it the best individual for the job? And then how the Security Council is made up. Now, of course, Egypt, we know, is a non-permanent member
Egypt
of the
is a
Security
member,
Council.
yes.
And I'm delighted to see that is so, because Egypt is actually going to handle in the Security Council matters on terrorism, which is something that we talked about earlier. So I think, yes, these are very fundamental and basic issues. And what we are now seeing is the objectives have been set. And if you look at the post-2015 development architecture, it's a very aspirational vision, very challenging vision, leaving no one behind, where you want to be in 15 years' time. So it's good that we have identified those goals. It's good that the global community has come together to find agreement on climate, which is something that has eluded us for so many years.
Yeah, but because it has no politics here.
Yeah, but then the question
is... no politics involved.
Then the question is, are we going to get the global governance right to make sure that we achieve these goals? And I think that is the question that you're alluding to. And what I find positive about this whole exercise is that people are beginning to question that. People must first ask the questions. We should not simply accept the status quo as being the best solution. So I think because you are asking, I also feel that this is a burning question, and maybe enough people will feel the same way, and that's how change happens. That's how change comes in. And we look forward to that.
I hope. I will be looking forward to that. Your Excellency Sabir Tشودري, President of the International Parliamentary Union, I thank you very much for being with me here in 90 minutes and having this meeting with me. And I hope that you will be able to carry with you to the IBU and to the IBU member countries the things that you have witnessed in our parliament, the things that you have seen here as an impression of somebody as distinguished as you. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for being with me.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
بشكر حضراتكم على المتابعة. دي كانت نهاية حلقتي معاكم النهاردة. دي كانت جزء من نهاية حياة أنا قضيتها معاكم في 90 دقيقة. بشكركم كلكم على متابعتكم خلال الأشهر الماضية، السنتين اللي فاتوا. بشكر كل أسرتي في 90 دقيقة. بتمنى لهم كل الخير، كل النجاح. بتمنى لكم كلكم أنكم دائما تكونوا بصحة وبخير. وزي ما دايما كنت بختم معاكم الحلقات، هختم كمان معاكم الحلقة دي. نشوفكم بكرة 90 دقيقة.